You guys talk to your neighbors? I talk to my neighbors. If I'm walking along and I see little Johnny run out into the street to retrieve his ball, the first thing I'll do is say, "Hey, don't run out into the street. Next time, tell your mom or dad and they'll get the ball for you." The next time I see his parents, I'd mention that I saw little Johnny running out into the street. They'd have a talk with their son, and problem solved. This is not speculation. I have done it because, you see, I talk to my neighbors. I would never, ever call the police for something like that. Don't the police have bigger problems to deal with? Murders and assaults? Little Johnny running out into the street can be easily solved. That is if you talk to your neighbors. That is if you respect your neighbors. That is if you have goodwill toward your neighbors and if you are not hostile to them. But George Zimmerman, he calls the cops. He calls the cops on a bunch of kids 4 to 11 years old running and playing in the street. George reports that they, quote, like to run out in front of cars. The cops respond and observe that each time a car comes through the area, the kids move out of the street to allow the cars to pass. How many times have we seen that happen? About a gazillion times. We see it on cul-de-sacs. We see it in gated communities. We see it on streets where there is low traffic. The children utilize the street as a play area. And whenever a car breaks the corner, they all move out of the way, the car rolls by, and they go back to play. See, if George talked to his neighbors, he could have grabbed a handful of popsicles from his freezer. He could have gone out there and told those kids, everybody gets a popsicle if you promise to play on the sidewalk. Maybe he could have smiled and had a friendly talk with their parents. That'd be kind of neighborly. But you see, George is not a neighborly kind of guy. George is all about excessive force. And notice something. He lies. He lies about what the children are doing. He exaggerates and embellishes to make what's happening seem worse than it is. George isn't trying to keep the peace. He's being hostile. You want to create enmity between you and your neighbors? You keep calling the cops on them for frivolous things. You want to create problems in your community? You keep spying on your neighbors and reporting them to the police. And when the police show up, they observe that there's no crime being committed here. But George, he wants to do two things. First, he wants to be the solution to a problem. But in order for him to be a solution to a problem, he has to create a problem. The man is a fucking psychotic. George Zimmerman, this guy, I want to say he was calling the cops for any and everything, but really that's not true. Not at the retreat. George was calling the cops on black people, black males specifically. And you have to believe there were pedestrians of all races moving through that community. But the white ones didn't bother George. The Asian ones didn't bother George. The Hispanic ones didn't bother George. George was bothered by the black ones. He called the cops on black children. He called the cops on a little boy, 7 to 9 years old, going to school. On 20-year-old black men. And finally, he called the cops on 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. All black. So we think that George Zimmerman is out of his mind. But George doesn't have uncontrollable outbursts. He doesn't yell at just everybody. George is really good at identifying cultural scapegoats. You know who cultural scapegoats are? They are black people, they are Muslims, they are Middle Eastern people, and let's not forget the Mexicans. They are a big cultural scapegoat now, thanks to the Republicans. Whenever George goes into a new environment, he identifies a cultural scapegoat. And then he identifies the others, 2 groups. And the others are everybody else. George knows there is a small segment of the others who are malcontents. The malcontents, they feel put upon. They feel the world just isn't fair to them. The world has become too politically correct. They feel oppressed that they can't tell black people and Mexicans and Muslims exactly what they think about them. And they really do believe that blacks and Mexicans and Muslims care what they think. And we know that if you harass people, you get in trouble. So the malcontents, they keep their mouths shut, but they don't like it. And along comes George, the problem and the problem solver. And he offers the malcontents his services. George says what they are too pragmatic to say out loud. George calls the cops on the blacks. He taunts the Middle Eastern guy at the office. He taunts the man and makes terrorist jokes and mimics his accent. And the malcontents say, "Hooray! This George, he's our hero." This is George's social currency. He becomes instant celebrity, a freedom fighter for bigots. And this poor man who is being taunted, too bad if he likes his job, because he can no longer function in it. Too bad if he has children to feed, he can no longer pay his bills. He's going to have to look at leaving this job earlier than he intended. But so what? George needs what George needs. But there's always a price. And believe me, George will pay that price. And meanwhile, the malcontents, they will send him money for his services. His expenses. These malcontents are a small group of people with serious personality disorders. They feel vindicated somehow that a child has been murdered. But these people might not have killed the child themselves because they know there are consequences. These are people who scapegoat minorities. It is so much easier to accept your failures if you tell yourself there's someone out there who is worse than you are. So now you know. And there is malicious method to George's madness. after all, isn't there? The malcontents cheer on the madman who says and does what they are just sane enough not to say and do themselves. And George, who really should have been medicated long ago to prevent him from shooting a boy to death, he will wind up in prison, as he should. He will pay the price. Thanks for listening.